Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Adam Winters, and he's not in Louisville today. He is down here in Mount Juliet. We're outside Nashville. We're in the same room. Maybe the editing will be quicker. Who knows? Maybe the podcast will be shorter. Maybe the podcast will be longer. But either way, we are here to celebrate Ernest saving Christmas.
Yeah, for a movie like this, I make the trip in, get the best recording for it. Top tier Ernest movie, in my opinion.
Definitely top box office. It grossed $28 million, highest for Ernest, off a $6.5 million budget. I was actually surprised just how well it did compared to Scared Stupid, which had a budget of had a budget of 9.5 and only took in 14. I thought it was higher. What do you know? So actually, Adam's been in for the weekend. We went to see a special screening of Ernest Scared Stupid at the Palace Theater in Gallatin. It was a celebration of the successful Ernest and the Dreamstone Kickstarter campaign. The writer Corey Perkins, Ernest IP owner Josh Cherry, and Jim Varney's nephew Justin Lloyd were there. And a packed house.
Was it?
Yeah.
We were in the front row, so I didn't have to look at anybody else.
It was packed-ish.
Okay.
And we also saw a real comic shop with real old comics, at Town Square Records and Comics in Gallatin, as well as a mere 30-second walk from the theater. Got there early.
Good little nook, if you can just make it through the stoplights at the Town Square. Pretty long stoplights.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that I go and pilfer all the good stuff before we air this episode, so you can get the good stuff. But yeah, it was good. So it's a little odd. I watched this movie, Ernest Saves Christmas, 3 or 4 days ago, but I've now seen Scare Stupid since then, so it kind of throws off the memory banks a little bit. So
now I'll just say out front, I think Ernest Saves Christmas is better than Scared Stupid. If you need me to defend it, I will, or we can go through it, even though I do love Ernest Scared Stupid. Well, this movie just checks all the boxes for me, what I want out of my Ernest movie.
Yeah, no, I think what surprises me a little bit is Saves Christmas came first, and its budget was $6.5 million. Scared Stupid was $9.6 million. So I don't know where they spent it. But I think part of the reason why I like Scared Stupid so much is that it just looks better. The film itself. Now, I mean, I'm not even talking about the special effects. Like, it just looks like it was recorded on higher quality film. And I do wonder if it's just the simple fact that Saves Christmas has not got any kind of remaster / update. It just looks old compared to Scared Stupid.
Now, it's interesting, too, because I see the Ernest Saves Christmas individual DVD fairly common. Maybe not the most. It's not like Spider-Man 2 common, but it's out there. Whereas the Scared Stupid, I've never seen it individually released. I've only seen it on that little 3-pack that at the time I thought was the cheapest looking DVD release ever. But it probably does look a little better, even with all that.
Well, and I watched the first 20 minutes in defense of Christmas in a hair salon on my phone without Wi-Fi. So it was not high quality. But I watched the rest of the movie on Disney Plus, and you would think that whatever the highest quality print is would be on Disney Plus, and it just wasn't. Whereas Scared Stupid, I watched it off the 3-pack, which I agree, cheapest release ever, and it just looks clear. Like, it's just less grainy. So this has nothing to do with the quality of the movie, but it just, like, how it presents itself, it just looks cleaner.
I guess I didn't notice any evident problems on the DVD. Why do you think? Because Disney and Touchstone are behind all 4 of these Ernest films. Why does Christmas get the individual release and the other movies get combination pack?
Well, it's Christmas.
Okay.
I don't know. Now, Scared Stupid did get an individual release. It's just out of print.
I assume Christmas is too, though, but more of them are out there.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question.
And the other thing is, this is the most Disney World of the Ernest movies, because they filmed it in Disney World, the MGM studio, as I understand, before it was open.
Yeah,
to the park.
Most of it was formed in Orlando. There was a few scenes filmed in Nashville. We assume that was the Bobby and what's his name, Chuck, I believe,
the warehouse.
Yeah, we just make that assumption. We don't really know, but we could have asked yesterday.
Well, they probably wouldn't have known Chuck and Bobby much.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. We saw Scared Stupid.
Yeah, because it had Tom and Bobby. Let me talk about Chuck versus Tom on the. I don't know if they're named Tulip in this movie, but Tom Tulip is unlikable and incompetent and all the other vices. Chuck probably has a very similar personality, but Chuck is likable despite all his goofiness and his flaws.
Now, for those who may not have seen the movie, what's the difference? Who are these people? Or visually, like what role is it? We get the big guy and the skinny guy. Which
Yeah,
one's which?
Bobby is the older, skinny guy who doesn't talk much at all. You know, it's not that he's completely mute, but he'll only talk when it's funny, to quote Roger Rabbit.
Are we allowed to say mute?
Are we not allowed to say mute?
I don't know. It's so confusing these days.
It's better than deaf and dumb. So,
yes.
mute.
I might even have to edit that one.
What? Just saying, it's better.
Maybe it's like little people. He's a quiet person. He's a quiet man.
Yeah, he's dedicated to his job. I'd say Bobby is dedicated to the work, but it's a comedy of errors for him. It always goes cartoonishly wrong for Bobby. Now Chuck supposedly is the brains of the operation, just as Tom was the brains of the operation in Stupid. But Chuck is played by Gaillard Sartain. And last I looked, he's still alive. I assume he's a guy around the Nashville area. Hasn't been active since 2005, but Gaillard Sartain is great with the subtle physical humor. He does the whole eye bounces. He does just very strategic things with his chops, his mouse chops, not his other kind of chops. But yeah, I love Gaillard Sartain as Chuck, and I just think he's a lot better than whoever the guy was who played Tom, who was sort of the not Chuck Tulip brother. So I'm glad to have him in this film.
Yeah, it's almost I wouldn't say he's a bully, but he could be a bully. But you do get the feeling he genuinely likes his coworker, so to speak.
His brother Bobby there.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though he's not the greatest supervisor. And he's not he is more or less committed to his work. Like, he doesn't try to scam anybody in this movie like Tom does.
True.
He's following the book. He's very convinced he's right, even when he's not. But he's doing everything he's supposed to do, and that's why ultimately the movie has a happy ending, because Chuck and Bobby, they kept this country running. The 4th of July, the Super Bowl. Who else is working on Christmas Eve? I'll tell you who. We who.
They didn't seem as excited about that until they realized what they had.
They coped with it surprisingly well with their big deliveries.
Which we can get into here in a minute. So Ernest Saves Christmas, it did come out in 1988. It was directed by John Cherry. It stars Jim Varney, Oliver Clark, Noelle Parker, who has a GoFundMe right now.
Really?
Yeah, she's not doing well.
Oh,
and Douglas Seal. Third film to feature Ernest Worrell. And second one to hit the box office.
Yeah.
Technically third movie overall. Second real movie, I guess you could say, after Ernest goes to camp. And this whole movie is about Ernest attempting to help Santa Claus find his replacement.
So he didn't start out that way. He started out just as a simple cab driver, wanted to enjoy his Christmas Yuletide season.
Yeah, it's so he's a taxi cab driver. If you look at his cab, he's got Christmas decorations throughout it. It's in Orlando. I don't know. We heard a rumor that there may have been a clause in the contract with Disney that they had to film one movie in Orlando. I don't know why there would be a clause in the contract.
Oh, Santa Claus.
It is odd that of all the movies, why would you pick the Christmas movie?
I guess they do make a big deal about snow in Orlando. That is a plot point later in the movie.
That is true, but it could have. They
could
have filmed it.
It's kind of just as rare at Nashville.
There's
Christmas time.
There's nothing in this movie that had to be in Orlando. There's no beach. There's no ocean, unless I'm forgetting it. So like, there's really nothing in this movie in terms of where they filmed it that it says we're in Orlando. Take it or leave it.
What about the Snake Ranch? Would that be a little bit weirder somewhere else other than Florida?
Well, let me clarify. They could say it's in Orlando. There's nothing that says I have to film this in Orlando.
Okay.
That's really what I mean. But yeah, so he's a taxi cab driver. He has a very fun opening scene where he loses his rider, so to speak, on the way to the airport.
Well, he gets him there.
It's a little unclear whether or not he jumped or fell. I think he did fall out of the car, but he could have jumped. It was a pretty scary ride. And it was a little bit over the top, even for Ernest, as the guy was rigid and dead looking, but with his eyes open, and it was a little over the top. In my opinion.
Whoever that actor is, he plays a good stiff guy.
Yeah,
Just you think he's dead somehow or just petrified. I love that whole sequence with the car. It's not a car chase. It's just a taxi cab driving recklessly on the interstate outside Orlando. But there's two sequences of that. One was the passenger, one was Santa. They're both well done.
yeah. So, in defense of Scared Stupid as the best movie, I think what happened between this one and the next, or between the next two, I guess, is at some point, I think in the Ernest movies, you transition from absurdity on all levels to Ernest himself being the absurd and everyone else playing the straight man. And this guy in the cab was not a straight man. Well, he might have been, but not in the sense of acting.
He's a bit of a jerk. He's like, hey, buddy, hurry up and get me to the airport. You know, those were back in the days when people didn't show up to the airport until like 20 minutes before their flight was leaving.
Those were the days. Those were the days.
Don't worry, mister.
They're 3 hours early.
We'll make that flight.
But anyways, I think there's an absurdity to the scene, which I think is funny. But I think the Ernest movie improved when they kind of limited the absurdity to Ernest himself. He needs to be the absurd character in the real world.
Are we talking about before or after he meets Santa Claus? Because he meets Santa Claus at the airport.
You can always. So. Well, I'm talking about before, but
all right.
I'm just saying. Obviously, you're going to have the silly element of the movie, whether it's Santa Claus or the troll. But I'm just saying, in terms of the other human characters, they need to be acting in a relatively normalish way. And even if they're silly and stupid, they're not like over the top.
In this movie, though. I mean, your other main characters are Santa Claus, Joe Carruthers, and Harmony Starr, not her real name. But they all have their different quirks and maybe their flaws, but they're more or less normal people.
But you do have this opening scene of this not normal writer acting dead, stiff, goes through the baggage claim.
That's so great. I want to know what happened to that guy.
It's a fun scene, though.
He went through the baggage claim.
So anyways, as Ernest is getting this guy to the airport, Santa himself is landing in Orlando.
On December 23rd. I forget what time of day. It's in the daytime.
Yeah. And he's having a conversation with a businessman, which comes up later. I don't think it's really that important, but they do type that loose end.
It's a plot point. It may not be the biggest plot point, but I think it is essential to how this one resolves.
Yeah, so and the guy says he liked it to snow on Christmas. Take note of that.
Not a CD player.
Nope. And I forget exactly when he meets Ernest. Oh, okay.
He needs a taxi.
And
Ernest needs to get out of there because he has angered
yes. So in
the Japanese consul. Or
no need to bring in nations.
I don't know. Maybe just some random businessmen, but
yeah. So in the process of getting his client, so to speak, to the airport, Ernest upset some other individuals who were arriving as well, and they chase him through not really the airport, but the outside part. And Santa needs a taxi, and Ernest comes in right in time. And the reason he needs a taxi is he needs to go meet Joe Carruthers, who has been chosen by Santa through a very selective process, it sounds like. So I don't know if he would even remember all the process. That's a plot point as well. To be the new Santa Claus, or at least to be offered the job.
So the trouble is Santa Claus has waited 1 year too long, at least 1 year too long, to transfer his power and his job responsibility. And this movie has a rule that Santa Claus is a mantle that is carried across several individuals. This Santa Claus was not the first, nor will he be the last. At least he hopes he's not going to be the last. But he's got to transfer his power to somebody else by 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Christmas Eve. I think I got that right.
Yeah, they were in Orlando, so I think that would be Eastern.
Eastern Standard
I'm not convinced that, and this is my other little small problem with this movie, he acts as if Christmas is over if he doesn't do this. So just because he can't do his best job, isn't it better to be a half-assed Santa than a full-blown successful one?
I don't know
for
how
at least
the rules
a year
work.
or two.
I'm just going to say the rules of the Santa Claus in this movie are a little bit more consistent than the rules of the troll in the last movie.
Yeah. So
Scared Stupid.
Here's the other problem with Saves Christmas. The Santa Claus movies with Tim Allen.
Okay.
So this movie
came later.
This movie's been one-upped 3 times over. TV series over. And in my mind, like, I hear you. But if you're asking me, am I going to watch a Christmas movie? Am I going to watch Ernest Saves Christmas or the Santa Claus? I'm picking the Santa Claus every time.
I
I love Ernest, by the way.
I love Tim Allen, but I will pick Ernest. If I'm going to pick 2 live action feature length films about Christmas, I'll pick Ernest, and I'm going to pick The Christmas Story. It's A Christmas Story. Now I'm forgetting. Ralphie and The Red Ryder Gun. I'm going to pick those 2 at my top.
Well, my 2 top are The Christmas Story and Christmas Vacation, just to be clear. But
Ernest is cleaner than Christmas Vacation. Christmas Vacation is great, but I'll watch Ernest anywhere with anybody.
Well, I'm watching Ernest with the kids. I'm watching Christmas Vacation with the wife, and with you, we'll stick with Ernest. But anyways, I just think this movie has not. It's really good, but you can only watch so many movies at Christmas, and that is a real problem. Especially if you start working in Rankin Bass like we've been doing.
For my sister and I, this is the Christmas Eve movie. We watch Ernest Christmas Eve at some point.
See, I just bought this movie on DVD 3 days ago, so I can't say it's been the Christmas movie because I didn't realize it was on Disney Plus. I had kind of forgotten about the Disney connection. You don't think of Ernest and Disney.
For this movie, I do. Orlando's everywhere.
But yeah.
What do you think about now the idea that we've seen an Ernest in Missouri? We haven't seen Goes to Jail. But that's obviously in Tennessee. And this one's in Orlando. What's the best place for Ernest to live if he's going to pick a residence?
Well, that's the other thing. I'm a little frustrated that they didn't put these movies in Nashville. They filmed them in Nashville. I mean, even this one had a little bit. I'm still a little irritated they picked Missouri, Briarsville, Missouri, instead of Bucksnort, Tennessee, for the Scared Stupid movie.
Or Dixon, right? They have the Ernest Day in Dixon, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Never been to it.
Ernest screams Tennessee or Kentucky. She's from Kentucky, but
married there right now.
Yeah. I don't really get why they picked Missouri. We should have asked yesterday. I feel like I had some good questions yesterday. I didn't want to have too many.
Well, yeah, we should have brought up the whole of the ignoramus et infinium on the sheriff.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a very subtle detail there.
Yeah, so the people who were out, there was a panel yesterday, and we were able to ask some questions. Now, they weren't like the prime players in the filming of Scared Stupid.
That's what we could get.
They were young at the time, so they were tied to it, but they wouldn't have been, in all the backdoor meetings. But yeah, I did like that. Where are we at? Joe Carruthers. He was a popular children's program host who emphasized manners, integrity, and clean language, and no violence, as we learned. But his program got canceled because those things just generally aren't that entertaining.
Local television was the idea.
Yeah.
Like Captain Kangaroo started that way, right? Local.
I think so.
Out of Chicago? Or was that Bozo the Clown?
Never watched it. Bozo was on WGN. I watched him all the time.
I remember when they abruptly said it was over. It's like, wow, Bozo's done.
Old WGN.
Yeah.
I watched every Bulls game for like 5 years on that station.
Boy, that was the right time for everybody in America, even if you didn't have full cable, to get the WGN station, and the Chicago Bulls were at their peak. So we were watching Michael Jordan all the time.
I do wonder, WGN might be the reason why everyone with a brain knows that Michael Jordan is the GOAT. Because we saw him.
As much as TNT and ESPN try to put the Lakers on or LeBron on all the time, it just doesn't hit the same.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel authentic. It feels manufactured.
Yeah. So during their drive, they encounter a runaway teenage girl, Harmony Starr. I forget her real name.
Pamela.
Probably
like not Isley, but probably like Finkelstein or something like that.
Did they give her a last name?
Yeah, because they only list it when Joe becomes Santa Claus, and he automatically knows it, and her address is somewhere in Indiana.
Okay. Oh, you gave away the ending.
What? Whatever.
I mean, an Ernest movie's going to have a happy ending.
You can bleep me out anyway if you want to.
So she joins with the taxi. She's on the run because she did some shoplifting, and
she had a story. She said,
quite the story.
It was, She said she'd been locked in the basement by her mean older brother. I love that scene when she first jumps in the taxi cab and she's telling her fake story, and Santa Claus is a bit befuddled by the whole thing, and then he just sort of takes it in stride, and he says, he introduces himself as Santa Claus. And then she looks over at Ernest, and Ernest has the funniest grin on his face. It's one of those rare moments where Ernest recognizes that somebody in the car might be weirder than he is, but he's okay with it all. He takes it all in stride as a taxi cab driver.
Oh yeah, so we should say Santa's not claiming to be someone else. Now they name him Santos at some point because they mishear him, but or cut him off I think mid word. But
That's nasty old Marty
yeah,
over there.
and he's Joe's agent, but he's claiming to be Santa. Ernest is being real nice to the guy, but he's not buying it, not yet.
Cause you am him.
Now the tree scene, was that later in the movie or was that here?
That is when he's given Santa the ride from the airport to the Orlando home.
Okay, so that's later. No,
hold on a second. So
I guess I'm saying is did the tree scene happen before or after Harmony got in the car?
The tree's before Harmony's in the car because they pick her up on the way to the children's home, and then Ernest drops Santa off, and Ernest goes back to the cab company with Harmony, and then they both get fired, and so they just keep hanging around together.
Yeah, so Ernest loses his job because Santa has mistakenly given all his real money away to some kid the prior Christmas. I guess that does lead in fact he probably needs to get out of the job. Though I don't think you have to end Christmas if you can't find the replacement. Just do a bad job one year.
Well, he won't have the magic to transfer anymore. That's part of the deal.
That wasn't clear. Not clear. He blames his memory, not his
That's
magic.
a rule in the Santa Claus too. Like if you don't follow all the individual clauses, you just lose the Santa Claus power. That's the second movie. It just disappears if he doesn't get married.
I don't think they clarified it to that degree.
Okay,
he's got less magic and he's got bad memory, but I don't know why those are connected.
So he's able to use his magic whenever he needs it, but
he's just got to take notes, which he says you're not supposed to have to do that. But do what you gotta do.
That was another thing that Tim Allen did, especially in the second Santa Claus movie. He had that magic meter, like when he needed to recall a Santa Claus fact, it cost him. I don't know if it cost this Santa here.
I mean, he's only 151.
We do see his birth. Did you see his passport? Did you take notes of
I saw the passport, but I think I was at the hair salon and it was pretty blurry.
The salon. Okay, well.
Sports clips.
There you go. His birthday, I think, was 1840 something. And his original country of origin was Prussia, back when that was a country. So that was on the passport.
I think of King of Prussia, the city.
Prussian Santa.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, where were we at? So Santa. All right. So anyway, Santa gave all his money away last year on accident. So he only has play money to give Ernest. And Ernest, heart of a child, gives him a pass. But then Ernest gets fired because his boss is not real happy with that.
I think his logic is off here. So he makes the comment, it's not like the cab company can't afford to give free rides to people now and then, but this has been something he's done before.
Yeah, it sounds like this is a common thing.
So I think even though Ernest has his heart in the right place, logically he would have to get his pay deducted if he wanted to, or like pay out of pocket to do these kind of deals for people.
Yeah.
Freely. So I can't criticize the boss in that case there.
No, I've dealt with people like Ernest. They generally don't stay employed. They're nice guys.
Yeah.
Ernest, the kind of guy, I used to have this. I always pride myself in that I could get someone to sign their write-up and agree with it. And I feel like Ernest is that kind of person. I've had a few employees just like Ernest. Oh gosh, I'm glad I'm retired. I got out when I could. So Santa does get to the Orlando Children's Museum. I don't know why Joe's still there. Maybe it's canceled. It's still recording. No, I'm trying to remember now.
He did not work. He didn't do his TV show for the museum. That was separate. But after his TV show got canceled, it looks like he was either volunteering or doing a very small performance for children at the museum. Those are two separate things.
Okay.
And that's why the secretary lady says we're lucky to have him. And she hopes he finds something soon. She makes that remark to Santa Claus.
He just doesn't feel very unemployed in this movie.
Joe?
Yeah.
Well, he's happy. He has his house.
Exactly. He doesn't seem very unemployed.
Back in those days, you could own a good-sized home on not a great salary.
Yeah. I just feel like if you're doing public television, like you probably don't have too many weeks of money in the bank to keep your house going. But I
love Ernest's impression that Joe would be rolling in the mucho dinero after all his years doing that show, and Santa Claus says, you don't get rich doing that kind of job.
Yeah. So Santa talks to Joe, or tries to talk to Joe, but he keeps getting interrupted. Joe's agent, Marty Brock, is kind of in the way. They're trying to get him to go audition for this new movie, Santa Slays.
Christmas Sleigh.
Christmas Sleigh.
Which I think they've made by now. I think
At
it
least three
exists.
versions of it.
Christmas
But yeah.
sleigh. So this is great character building for how they introduce Marty. First thing you see is that big old Mercedes just drives up, facing the camera. Would have been a big deal. And he jumps out of the car. It's a convertible, and he's humming a little variation on Jingle Bells about how he likes money. And the postman is walking out of the children's museum, and Marty just throws his keys at the postman, tells him to park it in the shade. And postman is giving him a very dirty look. But I'm thinking, did Marty go back and pick his keys up, or what? Because those keys are just going to be laying on the ground.
Yeah. So speaking of like, there seems to be a disconnect here between Joe, the public television children's host with no money, and the hotshot agent.
I'm kind of wondering, did he have an agent until he was fired, or in his later years?
And why is he spending so much time with Joe, other than this obviously B movie opportunity?
What's the name of the fake studio they invented?
I
The movie studio?
remember that. They did mention it, but
It feels very much like a Troma or an Orion or something like that. But we'll introduce the director later. He reminds me of maybe the guy from Full House.
Well, he was in the Santa Claus.
That guy? The director?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
He's Charlie's dad or stepdad.
That's the same guy? Holy cow.
Younger version, but yeah. I'm pretty confident.
I still am not making that connection. I can see the similarity, but...
So, anyways, they're not buying his story once they figure out what the story is, and Marty gets Santa arrested. I'm not quite sure why he got arrested.
The charge is curious here. Now, you would think the museum would have to be the one pressing the charge, as opposed to Marty, the agent, because it's not his property.
Yeah.
So it's trespassing, right? Or vagrancy?
Well, I mean, you get the feeling that they're just calling the police because they have a crazy guy, which is kind of where they were going with it. So why he got arrested, little unclear, not quite right.
We should note, while Santa is trying to talk to Joe and Marty, he realizes he left his sack in Ernest's cab. And Ernest now has possession of it. But he's running around, and that's what keeps him there until the night. And Joe is still there at night. And Joe is trying to take care of the guy. Marty says, you're missing your hair appointment. We got to get you a shave and a haircut to get you ready for your interview with the movie studio. And Joe doesn't want to shave the beard. Santa says, don't shave the beard. But again, that's why they delay so long. And then eventually, the museum is going to close. Only the secretary lady is there. And Marty calls the cops because he doesn't want to deal with anything else with Santa.
Well, in his defense, that is what you're supposed to do. I just don't understand
why they wouldn't leave.
I just don't understand why they arrested Santa or Mr. Santos when the police realize that they think he's out of his mind, out of his wits.
They book him and they fingerprint him.
And this isn't even
else.
the town drunk situation where they think he needs to sober up.
Right.
This is just he's an old man who they think is senile.
Right.
So I don't understand why they did put him in the cell with the safe people.
Ordinary, hardened criminals.
I thought they said harmless.
Oh, he does say harmless.
Ordinary, harmless criminals.
They don't look harmless. I'll say that.
They're pretty nice, though.
They're pretty nice, but they don't look harmless.
And Santa does convince them that he is Santa, the harmless criminals.
He choreographs them, makes them into a choir. That's very good.
He even gets the non-harmless criminals to join in. At least one of them sings harmony.
That's a great scene.
That is a good scene.
The hands in the jail cell.
So the next morning, Ernest goes back to the Children's Museum, speaks to, I think, the secretary, and finds out that Santa's in the slammer.
Santa's in the slammer.
Or at least he was taken away by the police, and Ernest assumes the slammer.
Is vagrancy a capital crime? So I guess that's the vagrancy is the charge there.
So Ernest pretends to be an employee of the governor, and Harmony, kind of going along for the ride, is posing as the governor's niece. She does a great job in the scene, by the way.
Mindy.
And they get Santa out, and Ernest dresses up in a suit. Jim Varney is so underrated as an actor. Again, it's a shame. So it's not a shame that he got typecast as Ernest in a lot of ways, because we got a lot of good Ernest. On the flip side, once these 4 movies got done, they were doing made to television or made to video. I would have loved to have seen him in some other stuff as an actor, not just a voice actor.
Some of those DVDs that got put out, there was an Ernest program called Your World as I See It, and he really leans into that snotty character with the glasses and the slick back hair. So you see a little bit more of that. But Governor Ellington, I think, is the fake Florida governor they make up. And
Should have used a real one.
I don't know who that would have been in
I don't either, but it should have
1988.
used it. Could have been Ellington.
So this, and I say there's more of a likelihood this works in 1988 than now, because you can't just look up online. Maybe they had a computer database.
Well, we got real ID now too.
Yeah, but he walks in, he says he's from the governor's office, and he picks the niece, because you're not going to know the niece of the governor for the most part.
Yeah.
And you're going all this. And let me give credit to Ernest and his so-called multiple personalities. Where in most Ernest movies, you do cutaway gags with all his different skits, which are funny. Every time he goes into costume and character in this movie, it is essential for the plot. And they do transitions, too. They suggest he's got all this junk somewhere in the back of his truck, or he knows where to go get it to just go into these costumes.
In these two scenes, I think he has two costumes. Oh, he's got three.
He got three.
But there's a break in the action between each one, so he has time to do his makeup and stuff his bra.
So it's very natural, very the way these things are done. And I don't think any other Ernest movie works these into the plot as essentially as Christmas does. And
I agree, and that is actually probably the best counter to what I said earlier about the absurdity.
So yeah, the governor's guy, he's very much straight-laced, and he gets Santa out by basically saying Santa needs to be committed to a mental asylum, which I guess in the 80s, you're dealing with a lot of people getting tossed out of the mental asylums I think that happened under the Reagan administration.
But we hadn't had the full embrace of drugs on the street and being homeless yet.
Maybe not.
That's a California thing.
So that his argument is he needs professional help. I'm just going to take this guy. And I guess if nobody's really pressing criminal charges against him, what's really the argument for not letting somebody just walk out with the guy if they're going to take care of him? Santa Claus is very happy when he gets out. I was not certain every time I watched this movie, at what point does Santa begin playing along with Ernest? It's not entirely clear if he recognized what's going on, and then he recognizes after it's over. He got really bailed out.
Well, I don't know that Santa can do this deceptive little things in food, but I don't know if he can speak a lie.
And he never did, because
So he argued with Ernest, but it worked. But he was doing it probably knowing that Ernest was up to something.
It helps Ernest's case if Santa comes across as
genuine.
Yeah. Or insane in this case. But yeah.
So they get Ernest out, or they get Santa out. Now at this point in the movie, they've looked in the bag and it glows brightly.
Ernest has. I don't think Harmony has.
She did.
Oh.
Okay. And that's where the confusing part. And this is another plot problem, which I think Scared Stupid is a tighter plot. But so Ernest is all in on this is Santa.
When they were at Vern's house, he looked in the bag for the first time.
Yeah. But Harmony saw the inside of the bag and it glowed.
When did she look at it, though? The first time?
I think the same time.
Because Ernest is out getting the bolt clippers while Harmony still inside Vern's house.
He showed her and he pulled stuff out of the bag.
So he does do the saying, isn't this what you wanted for Christmas?
And she says no.
And they didn't have Santa yet. And they said it doesn't work for you.
She's all in on saving Santa right now. But later in the movie, she has doubts that he's real Santa.
She's a teenager. Who's the actress who did Harmony?
Noelle Parker.
I think she was only about 16 when this movie would have been made.
That looks about right. And she does really good.
I guess she didn't do a whole lot more stuff. I guess she mostly did TV guest spots. So I am a little bit surprised she didn't have a bigger career, because she had a lot of talent at 16.
Well, Ernest movies never got a lot of respect.
This one got poor reviews, so I understand. I don't know. Well, you said Siskel and Ebert didn't review one until Scared Stupid, though, right?
Yeah, this one, let's see here. This is as of today, so this isn't really back in time, but they only 36% of the movie's reviews are positive on Rotten Tomatoes. It looks like it's averaged about a 4.9 out of 10. Metacritic has a 44 out of 100. Well, only 7 critics for what it's worth.
Forget them fools.
So this seems to be one of those 50-50 movies in terms of whether people like it. I just don't think most people...
People hate Santa Claus. That's what it is. Well, they hate Santa Claus.
They just don't appreciate Ernest. The problem with Ernest movies, not really a problem, but the perception is they're like lowbrow humor. Like Earl Pitts, so to speak.
And yet, The culture somehow embraced Adam Sandler by the end of this decade, the 1990s.
No, Ernest, in a lot of ways, was kind of just ahead of his time, I think. Though he was incredibly popular, but in terms of the national stage, for whatever reason, hasn't aged as well in terms of the popularity. And I don't really
See,
understand the why on that.
Ernest doesn't do like the potty humor stuff, or you have to understand enough wordplay to understand why Ernest is funny, because you have to laugh when he screws up a reference for the most part.
Yeah.
And he has the physical
I
humor
mean, he
too.
did impregnate a tree.
He impregnated
but,
a tree and scared stupid.
I mean,
Yeah, you got to understand what he's going for. And it's the Michael Scott. It's the Office. He's the Michael Scott character, just a little bit more
So
extreme.
my gut says in real life, he is a lot like Bob Saget. Bob Saget,
They're both dead.
well, but he's known for the ultra clean role, literally and figuratively, Mr. Tanner.
Fair enough.
But he also had some of the foulest language you'd ever have in private life, and also just in the stand-up comedy. Now I don't know what's Jim Varney's stand-up stuff is probably pretty clean, but this guy,
Fair enough.
I bet he has some
Fair
very
enough.
fun, inappropriate humor.
Hopefully
on the
not
side.
Bill Cosby level.
Well, no,
inappropriate.
but come on, nah, that ain't right.
We were talking about Bill Cosby yesterday.
This is Jim Varney.
Yeah, okay. The TV dad. You had to bring up the
Darkening his
TV
name.
dad and their alter egos. I'm going to go to Bill Cosby.
I brought the good one up.
All right.
And Bob Saget was a very, very good person.
Bob Saget
Also.
was loved by people that knew him. It
He
just,
told
he,
people that he loved them.
yeah.
In a good way.
It's not like he was a mean guy so far.
No, he was a great guy.
Right.
All right, where were we at? All right, Ernest gets Santa out of jail. I think this is when Ernest finds out from Santa that he has to pass the job on to someone by 7 p.m. I guess the 7 p.m. was just because logistically that's when he had to start.
It sounds like that's what he's got to do to get around the world in time.
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't know if that means, is it a hard and fast rule? I don't know. But it's the rule of this movie. And they have a ticking clock, 24 style, by the end of this movie.
They do. Ernest needs to get Santa to Joe for face-to-face, and he sneaks him into the movie studio where he's doing his one of the final interviews, so to speak. Or no, he's doing an audition.
Screen test.
Yeah, screen test. And Ernest disguises himself as a snake rancher. Sorry for the squeaky chair. Adam's got the good chair. I'm in the squeaky one today.
Before we get too far into the Apoca snake farm, Harmony is supposed to be doing something. Is she doing anything with the sleigh, or what's she up?
My gut says she's at Ernest's house playing with the bag, trying to get nice things out of it.
Yeah, she's wanting the CD players and all the other stuff people wanted in the 80s. Now, they've mentioned the sleigh is going to be picked up Christmas Eve. We've talked about Chuck and Bobby already.
Yeah.
But they're doing their deal at the airport. And right now they've got, I don't know if they had all these crates, and it says hold for helper elms or helper elves. And we're cutting back and forth to Chuck and Bobby, and progressively it gets weirder and weirder at their warehouse, where all the reindeer begin to pop out of the crates and start to do their stuff.
Yeah, so I know this is all about the budget. Is the reindeer get out and they all start walking on the ceiling. They're not flying, they're walking on the ceiling. But they talk to them as if they're flying. I know that all they really had was the floor and a camera upside down. But, I never got a good shots of the reindeer. So I don't really know if they're CGI, real reindeer, or what they are. They are so quick to do it. I don't think they're stop motion, but I don't know what they are.
I guess the Tim Allen movies used animatronics, all of them, for the reindeer. And I don't feel like those are animatronics.
This is a $6.5 million budget.
No, not
most of that was cast. So I'm not sure. They did a good job disguising the low budget on the reindeer.
Anytime they talk about flying, they only show Chuck, and they have them looking up and saying that they're starting to do laps, and they do the little sound effect, zooming around.
But for the most part, they're walking on the sea.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
I like when they bust out of the boxes. They stick the hoofs through.
Oh, yeah.
Just popping out like it's a horror movie. And then, speaking of the horror movie, back to Joe Carruthers.
Yeah, so Joe's doing his test, and they're doing a scene. So this is not a Santa sleigh, as in like the sleigh. That's the physical object. It is Santa sleigh, SLAY, which horrifies Santa later. And we're actually probably in the scene. And then So he's
Yes.
doing a scene. He's talking to these children. Maybe he sends them to bed. I can't quite remember. But there's a knocking on the door that is, not a good knock. Oh no, what's going on? Knock. And a monster breaks through. It's like from the Black Lagoon.
Swamp Thing or something.
Yeah, I expected a guy with an axe. I kind of initially thought that Joe was going to be the villain, but really he's this guy getting killed. And he's supposed to say something to the effect of, "Get out of my house, you SOB." And he just can't say the cuss word.
And I like how he hides the gun behind the tree. It's a little pistol. He pulls it out. He pulls the pistol out of the tree somehow or from behind the fireplace. And he's got the gun on the creature. And so the line is, the director says, "Joe, it's nothing they haven't heard before." And Joe says, "Yeah, but not from me." So that's just, he can't violate his own principles there with the kids around. And then I guess he knows he just doesn't want his legacy to be that.
He's got a reputation.
He's got cheapo horror movies at the end of his career.
Bob Saget would say all kinds of things on his stand routine, but not on Full House or Fuller House.
That's true. So then, so Santa's watching all this and he's horrified, and he goes up to the director, and you can tell his blood pressure gets up. He's getting red. His veins are popping a little bit, and he does a very interesting punch. He hits the director in the nose, even though the director is taller than him, with the bottom of his fist. Is that kind of what he does? He bops him. Less of a punch, more of a bop on the nose.
Well, let's just say this director, who I still believe is Charlie's stepdad in Christmas. I'm sorry,
Norm,
the Santa
right?
Claus.
The psychologist.
Yeah, not a man's man.
Him and his Bill Cosby sweaters.
You and Bill Cosby. Apologize for the gardeners, everyone. We got people in the neighborhood today.
People doing work.
So yeah, he gets a punch, and Santa doesn't get arrested.
That would be assault.
But he got arrested for being crazy before.
Vagrancy.
But yeah. So, anyways, I do believe that at the end of the day, Joe does have the conversation with Santa in this scene. He basically tells his agent, "Look, the guy's obviously determined to talk to me. Let me talk to him so I can send him on his way." And Santa tells him the story, and you can tell Joe wants to believe it, possibly because he really doesn't want to be in this movie. But he's wanting to believe it, but not buying it. And then, so he kind of sends him on his way. Maybe he tells him he'll think about it. I don't know. But Santa, decides he's going to go visit him at his house later. And because of the job, he remembers that.
So Ernest, all this time, he's out with his truck, which he has decorated in the Apoka Snake Ranch. And he plays one of his characters who has a name, but not, in his other routines, it's like a real rough redneck Ernest version. And
almost like a New Orleans kind of character.
And when he got into the studio, he faked having a bunch of snakes in the back of his truck because Santa was back there. But when he's in the studio, they dump the real snakes in the back of his truck.
This Santa's not all clean cut. He's back there playing along. He's got the water hose waving around. He's got the children's rattle. And so he's playing along.
I like how he acknowledges the ladies when he's in the studio.
Yeah, he's a flirt.
He's a gentleman, though.
That's why he needs to get out of the Santa spot. He's like, I need to settle down.
He does need a date. He hadn't had one, and he was not bound
to never had one.
He was not bound to the Mrs. Claus. That was not a factor, but he is looking for a date sort of once he gets done with the Santa Claus gig.
Yeah. So they get Santa, or Ernest takes Santa after this is over. I think this is when they go to Bobby and Bill or whatever their names are.
Well, they dump the snakes out first.
Well, yeah, there's a little scene there.
They're running out of time because this is Christmas Eve.
Yeah, they have till 7 o'clock. It's probably 3 o'clock probably. They're playing as if they got like not a ton of hours left.
Yeah.
So they go and they get the crates and
hold on.
No, I'm sorry. No, back up. Santa, he drops Santa off at Joe's house.
Yes.
And then Ernest goes to the airport.
He's going to get the sleigh. But before they do that, Harmony swapped the sacks.
Yes.
She gave him a fake sack. And she said she was going to leave, I think. Like, she said she was going to
go to her parents, I think.
No, she had somebody she was going to visit locally.
Yeah.
She said, I got to visit my cousin or whatever. And she hid the real sack in Ernest's boat out behind his house and put a fake one. Gucci gummy.
Something like that. But I will say, so Ernest tells Santa, you might want to check that sack because I don't trust her. And he does. And it's the real one at the time because she switches it right after. And he says something to the effect of, you just got to trust people sometimes.
Pays off. More than you think.
And then he got his sack swapped and was regretting that for a little while.
And he sort of noticed right away, but he just went on with the job. He had
problem number 2, by the way. So he goes to Joe's house to officially offer the job, his answer, with a fake sack.
Yeah. That's all right, though.
And then Joe says, so we do this with the magic sack? And he's like, yeah, but this is the fake one. This isn't the real one. Like, you're better off not having the fake one. He ditches it later, but it's like, well, what is the value in carrying around the fake sack?
Because we get the Santa Claus tears as he says, I know it's just feathers. It's like this crisis of face that
but
you
why
have
is he
this
carrying
moment
around
there.
the sack?
I know it's a little odd, but again,
there's no value.
But again, it's
no
that
great value here.
It's the trust me on face, even though it doesn't look like it's
isn't going to turn
out.
into the right sack.
I know it's not.
You're trying to do.
But again, I think he did it for Ernest's sake, because he had to take it out of the truck with him.
But
he must have thought it gave him the look when he was talking to Joe if he could hold a sack with him.
Maybe
a gunny sack.
When he's talking to Joe, Joe has just shaved and dyed his hair.
He has. He doesn't look better. He looks worse, in my opinion.
The gap in his teeth shows more.
It does.
But he's committed at this point to taking the role of the movie because he needs some money. And as much as he would love for the Santa job to be real, he recognizes it's not. And he tells Santa, hit the road, buddy. And Santa's sad.
I need something more.
Sad.
I need something more than just feathers, as he puts it.
Yeah. So Santa is sad, and he gets a bus ride, throws away the sack finally.
Oh, it's so tragic. The way the feathers blow in the wind when he throws. It's a very Forrest Gump kind of moment there. He's just out there, and he's talking to the guy on the bench. It's like, well, misjudged somebody today. And you're not sure if he's really talking about Harmony or Joe. And he said, if I could be wrong about one person, I guess I could be wrong about another.
Yeah.
And,
we missed my favorite line in the whole movie. At some point, Ernest dresses up as the lady. The very large lady.
The mama.
Yeah. And anyways, that part, we're kind of past that part in the plot. But Harmony asks Ernest, how did it go? Ernest P. Worrell, it worked great. Victory is at hand. Now we have to move on to what I like to call Plan B.
Right. Right. I love the whole scene with Marty's office and the receptionist, and Ernest is in his get-up. And he says, wouldn't you know it? You have 2 sons, one good, one bad, and with my luck, the good one died. And he said, having walked here from the airport, I'll be dead soon. And then the secretary receptionist is trying to defend Marty. He's like, don't side with him, honey. There's no future in it. It's so dark. I love the darkness of that.
Really good.
That's his best. I don't know what he calls the old woman character, but he plays that better in this movie than I think he does in any of the other.
He plays all these characters truly straight in the sense that they're not interacting with his other characters. They're interacting with real people.
Yeah.
Whereas normally he's kind of talking to himself and he's going back and forth between the fake characters.
Right.
So let's see here. So at this point, we kind of have multiple people in multiple places. Ernest is working with a couple of elves that just arrived.
Well, hold on now. So the elves came in separately. The reindeer is still at the warehouse. Ernest is on his way to the warehouse at the airport, and he's got a truck.
Yes.
Hold on a second.
No, they get the truck at the airport. Truck shows up at the airport. Unclear where it came from.
Yes. It had been worked out somehow to reserve a Ryder. Is it a Ryder or a Penske truck?
They probably could afford Penske.
So they had some truck, and so the sleighs in the truck.
Not seen. Just show. I mean, they don't show it. The budget wasn't there yet, or what?
Right. Santa's still trying to win Joe over. Where does Santa go when he leaves Joe's house?
So Santa gets on the bus, and I believe he goes to the Children's Museum.
Because he's going to wait for it.
Because he's only got till 7 o'clock.
He's going to wait.
He doesn't expect a good response, but he's waiting. He has to be there at 7, and he's hoping that Joe shows up and that Ernest shows up with the reindeer.
And Harmony is at the bus station. She's trying to get as far as she can go away from Orlando, and she's got the sack.
And I think it was Tampa was as far as she could get, something like that. It was not a long bus ride.
And just like in Ernest Scared Stupid, what changes things is a mother talking to her child, and in this case, one sibling insulting another sibling. And the mother says, we got to get home in time to, meet Santa. And the brother's trying to tell the sister Santa isn't real, and Harmony gets all in the brother's business. She has to go, said, don't say that to her. Of course he's real. This is his magic sack. The little girl says, if that's Santa's sack, why do you have it? Ah. And she's convicted there. And so she decides.
Grinch's heart grows.
She decides she's going to run all the way from the bus station to the children's home with the big old sack hanging off of her.
Museum.
The children, yeah, sorry. Children.
There's no orphans in this one.
Oh, man.
So,
the Science Museum.
Yeah, so this, the last 15 minutes or so, you have all these different parts in different places, and they all need to get to be at the Children's Museum before 7 for Christmas to be saved, because Old Man Santa, this ain't got the magic. So you have Santa's waiting, and he's flirting with the secretary.
They're chatting. They're getting to know each other. But
and Ernest is working with the elves, who are not children. I appreciate that.
They look like Wizard of Oz veterans. That's what they look like. It would have been possible in 1988 to have Wizard of Oz.
He's working with the elves to get Bobby and Chuck and Tom's to release the reindeer, and then you have Harmony with the sack,
and you have the movie studio where Joe's at,
and then you have the movie studio, and they're trying to get Joe to sign the contract. And when Ernest and the elves get the reindeer on their way out of the airport, trying to get away from traffic, they blow all the tires in the truck.
They go the wrong direction on the spikes, which I think about every time I see those spikes. Yeah, so because I think about the Ernest movie.
Ernest's plan to get the thing there is just to fly the sleigh at that point. The elves are not really thrilled about that. And then so he's flying the sleigh. Joe happens to see it.
Well, hold on, wait. He doesn't remember the names of the reindeer first.
Oh yes, yeah.
And the one that always gives him the pause is the last one. Blitzen, yeah. And he goes, and it's funny. I love the setup on Santa's sleigh, how the names light up when you say them. And, like, if you don't, they start to
powering down. But you don't have to say them all again.
He just said it, and they all went back. So long as they're still lit, I suppose. Now, the other plot thread is the guy from the airport, the businessman, who's on the phone, and he's really upset, and he wants to close a deal on Christmas Eve. He said, it's now or never. And then...
You're jumping ahead.
We are. Yeah, Joe's got to get to the Children's Museum before that happens. You're right.
Yeah, so Joe sees the reindeer out the window, and he believes.
Merry Christmas, everybody!
He really didn't want to do the plot or the horror movie stuff. So he basically says, Merry Christmas, you guys.
Everybody.
Doesn't tell him off. He just says hi.
No.
And then he runs.
Marty says, Joe, what is with you? Looking out the window.
Yeah. So he's running to the Children's Museum, not the home. He meets up with Santa. He says, is the job still available? He says, yes.
For the right man,
For the right man.
And then he dramatically sticks the hand out to shake.
When he shakes his hand, so all his power moved over to Joe. And goodness gracious, Joe became a Santa that would be starring in a movie called Santa Slays.
Chris, you're talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night kind of outfit. I like, so he gets a new beard. You know,
not an improvement. This is the cheapest Santa.
Hold on now.
Joe's not the man for this job.
Hold on now. How many movies do you know that start out with a guy that I assume is a real beard, and then they shave it before the end of the movie, only to put a fake beard on him? Do you think that's what happened in this?
I do.
He had a real beard and he shaved it. Yeah. Genuinely. Very few movies probably do that.
And they put a fake one on that looked very fake.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
And even more accentuated the gap between the teeth.
So I should also add...
This is Rose Art Santa.
This is the only time in the movie we see a Santa Claus suit on anybody. Right? Other than, like, the guy collecting.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
The original Santa Claus here never wears the suit, which I'm perfectly fine with that. He looks...
Oh, he's Miracle on 34th Street now.
He looks absolutely like Santa Claus, even without any suit. Even though he's not terribly fat. He's a jolly old elf. He's a little bit plump there. Just an old guy in pretty good condition.
Now, I say this, I'm making fun of this, but I'd have nothing against Oliver Clark. He played Joe Brothers. He was a good actor in this movie. He just didn't, in my opinion, look the part of Santa. If you're going to bring in a picture-perfect Santa in his Miracle on 34th Street suit, you got to have something on the other end of that movie. He has to pass it on to an equal.
Well,
and this is not.
Do you agree that when Joe becomes Santa, he feels a little bit like Tim Allen in the beginning of the Santa Claus when he's doing his first run?
But Tim Allen looked better.
No beard, though. I mean, the very beginning, though. Like when he's just going around throwing the presents against the wall.
Well, he didn't have white hair and a white beard. If Joe had just looked like Joe, it might have worked a little better. I'm just saying, like, it didn't look good.
You know, going back to Rankin Bass, the Santa Claus is Coming to Town movie, he doesn't have a beard initially in that movie. They could have gone with that, just to imply that Joe will grow into Santa Claus.
I think they should have just put him in the suit, a la Tim Allen, beginning of the Santa Claus, where you're going around with.
All right,
but it didn't look very good. If you can't make it look good, don't do it.
So who shows up first, Joe or Pamela?
So Pamela gets there because initially Joe's like, "So now what?" He's like, "Well, we're a little underprepared here."
Oh, no, the sack came first because she has the embrace with Santa.
Okay.
And Joe's there with the sack, but he doesn't have the sleigh.
Right. And they're saying Ernest has to show up, and I think it's like 6:55 at this point, so their hopes are starting to get dashed.
And I love the Santa Claus, the original Santa Claus. What's his actor's name?
Douglas Seal.
So I love Douglas Seal. He does his own little Ernest chuckle.
He did.
And we cut immediately to the end of the Superman movie shot, where the
Ernest
red
is going
streak
around the world.
It's not turning it back. If only he could turn time back, then he could have done that.
And
like
Ernest has hit the gas on this thing. He doesn't know how to slow it down. To actually pull the brake.
Let me add too. We got a Millennium Falcon hyperspace light speed shot before it was overdone. We got one of those with the sleigh.
And we have Ernest breathing in space.
I need oxygen. He goes for the... Do you love how Santa has an oxygen mask built into his sleigh?
Well, that's an Ernest thing.
But
it could have been Ernest's back pocket.
And so I do wonder about Ernest breaks the sleigh. He is it the brake or the emergency brake? He just pulls the thing off.
The emergency brakes. So it probably did have still the real... I mean, it's being flown by reindeer, so it's really their brakes. But, you know, it's a gag. Anyway, it's funny.
Okay.
It's stupid.
Now we got to go back to the businessman again because they're all at the Children's Museum. And Joe says, well, second job I've lost tonight. And he says, is there anything I can do? And Santa's like, well, not so much with Ernest in the sleigh, but there is one thing you can do just to give somebody something. I don't know if it matters.
Is this just to get a head start in the 7 p.m. deadline? Does this mean he's got till 7:01 because he can get this one out of the way?
Well, he had the power transfer.
Yeah.
That was the deadline. Well, oh, no, he's got to leave by 7. Oh.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe 7:01
yeah, maybe.
now.
But he says, I met a very nice man at the airport who wanted snow for Christmas. And they give this big old scene where Joe makes it snow. And we do get to see the businessman, and he's happy. It's snowing just like home in Minnesota or whatever. And he tells the guy on the phone, don't worry about the deal. Go home, spend it with your family. We'll worry about it later. And at that moment, now Ernest is suspended in space. They're stopped up there. And I think the reindeer recognize when the snow starts to happen in Orlando. I don't know if it's made super evident, but it's the magic of Santa Claus that's taking place in Orlando. The reindeer know to go right to that point. They zoom in right to that location.
I mean, they started in Orlando. Let's go back to where you started.
But Santa hadn't used any magic. See, that's the thing. It was the first time Santa had used magic, and the reindeer knew right where to go.
Yeah. So there's a trend in Ernest movies where when they wrap things up at the end, they don't necessarily get there in a coherent way, and there's some jumps in logic.
This is not a bad one, though.
No, but it's Scared Stupid. It was like Ernest magically realizes hard to child.
But he hears the people talking because he acknowledges them somehow.
He's telling them to kill him.
But he seems to hear Eartha Kitt.
I don't think so.
He seems to.
Anyways, too convenient. And this is one of those a little too convenient. Could have just gone a little bit more to wrap this up in a little better way. Like Ernest could say, I see magic down there. Maybe they can have a little blip of CGI. So Ernest gets the reindeer down. Last second, split second.
Air brakes. And a perfect landing after that. They just kind of nosedive.
Yeah. And they stop right for the ground.
Right.
And then you can see it kind of transition where they kind of even out, but they don't have CGI budget for reindeer. So it's not really on scene.
Yeah.
But they land, and Joe gets in to go take off, and Ernest is looking all sad, just like in Scared Stupid. Nothing's coming out of that tree for me.
He needs a dog for Christmas.
Dog for Christmas. And Joe asked Santa if it'd be okay if he had a guest driver. And Santa said, I don't think there's a rule against it, but he wouldn't remember because he was old anyways. And then so Ernest is going to drive the sleigh. He's all excited. And then they ask if they can have a special elf. And Pamela comes along too before she goes home.
The elves want none of this business here.
Oh, no.
It's suggested they're going to drop Pamela, who's a real name, off in Indiana when they get there.
Yeah. Yeah, Buddy Douglas and Patty Maloney, the elves, not thrilled.
No. I like that scene where they said, we told him, Santa says, Ernest, you drove the sleigh? Elves said, we told him not to do it. Santa said,
not to do it.
What a great idea. It's like, oh,
we thought it was great too.
Yeah, sure.
So, and that's
an elf.
Basically how the movie ends, other than the equivalent of the Easter egg scene at the end.
Yeah, Chuck it. This was before it was super popular to do in-credit scenes.
Yes.
And Ernest did this with Chuck and Bobby. We cut back to him in the warehouse. And the big old ears pop out of the crate.
Yes. Never to be paid off. And the movie ends with the Easter Bunny.
And yet, for the next movie, Ernest was going to jail.
Yeah.
So
I will say, too, from the very beginning of the movie, Ernest movies always open in a fun way. In this particular movie, it opened up with Coca-Cola advertisements.
Norman Rockwell, right? The Coca-Cola Santa Claus art, which was probably the first time I had seen that back in 1988. There's a lot of Coca-Cola in this movie. I don't know if you saw the product placements. It's not super obvious aside from the opening, but
no Mellow Yellow.
One thing I like, Chuck at the airport, he had the little chain hanging around his neck with a Coke can in it. It is a little disappointing to have an Ernest movie with no Mellow Yellow. It would have been perfect, but I'm sure it's whatever the Disney deal was for endorsements.
Yeah.
And, you had to have the Coke Santa. Now, I guess the one thing is, the intro is not customized in any way for Ernest. Like, they don't put in any superimposed Ernest heads onto any part of it.
It was Scared Stupid. You had him acting scared, and you would show the clip of the B movie. This is just straight advertisements. I can't recall. I haven't seen Camp in a long time, or even with Jail.
Rides Again has a very customized Ernest intro. They give him a theme song for that.
Okay, but yeah, Ernest Saves Christmas. Opening weekend, it placed second at the box office. Did not become number one, behind Child's Play.
Woo! Man, another Christmas classic, right?
Absolutely. It did get $5.7 million. Its opening weekend, 1,600 theaters. Ended up getting 28.2. Highest grossing Ernest film, probably by far, I guess, at this point. I'm not sure about Jail, but yeah.
As I recall, I saw it at the MIDEA Theater in Waverly, Tennessee, a little old town square theater. And that was pretty special for me. I want to just note again, why I think this movie is so good just as a movie. You have at least 5 different plot threads with different characters that have to carry each one. And all of them build over the movie and they come together at the end. And very few movies are able to do that successfully. I'd say Ernest Saves Christmas pulls that off better than Star Wars The Phantom Menace. It's superior.
Low-hanging fruit.
We love Duel of Fates. We tolerate the spaceship scene, I think, with Jake Lloyd. And then we just endure the whole deal at the palace with Amidala, right? And then what else is going on?
People say that movie has aged well.
I like it. It entertains me. I'm not going to say it's a great movie, but it does entertain me.
I think we just feel bad about how we treated the kids all those years. And we want to call it a good movie now and make us feel bad that we were all jerks.
I never said anything bad about Jake Lloyd. I didn't understand how bad he was as a kid. I understand now how bad he was in that role.
Wrong kid, wrong time. Not his fault.
But I didn't. To me, as a kid, I thought it was fine because I was interested in the lightsaber stuff and the new music by John Williams and Obi-Wan. And all the video games were fantastic. Let me tell you, Episode 1, best video game tie-in for any Star Wars movie. It's a shame we've never gotten an Ernest video game. That is the untapped market right there.
I think the Ernest stop motion a la Rankin Bass is the untapped market.
So
I'm not convinced there's enough market.
We need Ernest action figures from NECA, not Funko Pops. God help us. We don't want Ernest Funko Pops. But we need a video game. I hope it's not made by Game Mill. Like, I don't know who would make it.
It needs to be 2D.
Okay.
3D.
Way Forward could make us an Ernest video game. Let's go with that.
Maybe he just needs to be a playable character in a fighting game.
You can work him in, yeah. We'll start with that. Work Ernest in. You can't do him in that whole multiverse thing because he's not under the WB.
Oh, you don't want nothing. WB doesn't need to touch him.
No,
They'll screw it
oh
up.
gosh.
They'll cancel him right
Keep
before they release
away.
it.
Keep
He'll
him
be a
away
tax
from
write-off.
WB.
He'll be a tax write-off.
Oh, he would. But Disney's not much better because they don't love the Muppets anymore. So I don't know what the best option. Paramount?
Doesn't need to be
No.
Disney.
No.
Anyways, so a few cast notes. Douglas Seale's Santa Claus. He was also the Sultan in Aladdin.
I never put
Basically
that together.
He looks the same too.
And I did not. I always thought he was the random guy in the crowd in Rocky 3 when they were on the steps dedicating the statue. But I don't think that's him. I always thought that was the same Santa guy with the beard.
Billy Bird was Mary Morrissey, the secretary. She was in Home Alone.
They get a little bit of a date, we should mention.
Oh, yeah, they take a date at the end. Yeah.
Now, I'm a little surprised when Santa transfers his magic, he doesn't just turn to dust.
You would think. They imply that he's going to keep being old for a very long time.
He's going to live like a natural 80-year-old or so, you know, a 70-something-year-old guy. He's just going to...
Other fun fact, the old elves, Buddy Douglas and Patty Maloney, they were the operators of the Crypt Keeper puppet in Tales of the Crypt.
I had no idea.
They didn't voice it, but they worked the puppet.
Were they Wizard of Oz veterans?
I didn't see that. But yeah. A few other notes. I did make note of the nice pacing and going back and forth between the different subplots.
Hard to do.
They tied together very nicely. I said Joe looks like an off-brand B-movie Santa who would star in Santa Sleighs.
Christmas Sleigh.
Even for an Ernest movie, you're right. I feel like the special effects were too cheap looking in a little ways. But again, I think some of it's just real grainy. And I don't think they had a real plan for the reindeer, so they just kept them very quick and blurry. Not a big deal, but I love the old elves. I like the fact they weren't children. That gets old.
They've been working with Santa a long time.
So those soundtrack for this never got officially released. So Mark Snow did produce a promotional CD with 25 tracks.
I just thought most of them were standard public domain Christmas songs.
Yeah, but so I don't know if they ever intended for it to get released, but there was the promotional CD as they were getting the movie going. And
that's why you needed a CD player to play the CD soundtrack.
Yeah. And there's really no true antagonist in this movie.
Other than Marty, who's not really the... I mean, he's doing his job.
I wrote the agent ? But I don't think you could really call him the villain. He did think he was crazy. It's not like he thought it was Santa was trying to screw the thing up for Joe.
Arguably, he has Joe's best interest professionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not personally, but professionally, he has his best interest.
We would do what he did. Maybe not the same exact way. You know, he called the police because he had a crazy person thinking they were Santa. He was going to help him initially trying to find his sack until he got that information and he thought his name was not Santos, but Santa.
Just because you're a jerk and greedy doesn't make you a villain. We have to acknowledge that.
No, he didn't intentionally get the real Santa arrested.
Right. And he didn't cheat Joe at any point. You know, that's the other thing.
No, he's trying to talk him into his contract.
Right. And it just wasn't meant to be.
So it is interesting. No real villain in this movie.
And that's okay. You know, the villain is the unbelief.
And I would argue the best Christmas movies don't have an antagonist. Because the best Christmas movies, and most good ones, it's all about convincing someone that they're wrong.
The spirit of the season.
Yeah.
The change of heart.
Santa Claus, you have the changing of Tim Allen's his motivations.
Yeah.
What does he value? Changing of values.
And even the ex-wife and her new husband, they come around too in that.
And they're not trying to be, they're just not believing that the person's Santa.
So they have the best interest of the child.
And frequently it is the main character changing from I won't say bad person, but a bad position to a good position is the whole point of the movie.
Let me add one other thing.
Like Scrooge.
Let me add one thing about this movie. Ernest is not, in my opinion, the protagonist of this movie. I'm saying that as a compliment. The protagonist is probably Santa Claus. He's the one trying to make something happen. Ernest plays the role of the hero in this movie. Those are two different things. The hero is not necessarily the protagonist, and vice versa. Santa's the protagonist. He drives the plot. Ernest is there to make everything succeed. He comes along and is the unlikely hero. And I think this movie gets a little bit of credit for that because Ernest doesn't have to carry the dramatic parts of every scene. He's just there to make this work.
Now, if anything, there's risk of there being too many cooks in the kitchen in this movie.
They pull it off, though.
They do. I will say they pull it off mostly because of Douglas Steele with his portrayal of Santa Claus.
Perfect casting.
If they didn't get that right, just say Joe Carruthers had been playing the part.
It would have been rougher.
You needed a genuine old man with a nice dialect to pull this off.
We should have had an Adam West, Jim Varney movie. That would have been fun.
I would like to see Adam West as Santa.
As the guy who takes over? Ooh, wait a minute.
Either one.
That is fascinating.
I'd take him as the original, for it's worth. Burt Ward could have taken over.
Boy, what a movie that would have been.
There's so many people that have been fun to see Jim Varney interact with. Bob Saget, as we mentioned earlier.
He was good buddies with Robin Williams, but I don't think they were ever in a movie together.
I don't think so either, but they would have been nice.
Yeah, they had the same kind of humor.
He could have met Mrs. Doubtfire. In his little lady suit.
Oh, man. The road not taken. If there's any value in artificial intelligence, maybe it can reimagine something like that one day.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just to imagine what it could have been like.
Well, Ernest Saves Christmas. What did we rank this out of?
5 out of 5 something for me.
It's got to be something. So what's the something?
You talking about magic sacks or Christmas sleighs? Yeah.
I'm going to give it 5 or I don't know about 5.
I'm giving it 5 out of 5.
I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 sleighs.
Not 4.5? I got a petition for 4.5.
I'll go for 4.5.
I'm giving it 5.
Merry Christmas, then. We'll do 4.5.
Know what I mean? All right.
So 4.5 sleighs, 5 sleighs rounds up to 5 overall. If we ever do Santa Claus, I'll give it 6.
Do we have to do like all the Santa Clauses? Once you start on the Tim Allen one, you go down the rabbit hole.
They're all good, but they're not all. It's too much. It's like you can only watch so many Christmas movies.
Much like the Snow Miser. When you get to Martin Short, he's too much. Jack Frost and all that.
He was misused in that movie. That movie could have been. It was still good.
Yeah, it's fine.
It could have been so much better.
And I feel like the longer a movie franchise goes, eventually they got to rip off It's a Wonderful Life. Now, let me say one thing quick about It's a Wonderful Life, because I mentioned my 2 favorite feature films. I look at It's a Wonderful Life.
He's pointing at the microphone.
It's a New Year's movie. I view it more as a New Year's movie than a Christmas movie, and I will go to that.
You only got 6 days to watch a New Year's movie, whereas you got 2 months.
It's just, to me, there's more New Year's themes about sort of appreciating what's come before. It's not like the Christmas spirit changes George Bailey. The Christmas spirit doesn't change him. It's reflecting on his life and the connections he's made and seeing what the world would be like without him there. That's what wins him over.
I'll say I'll call it a Christmas movie, but that's not my favorite Christmas movie. But I am the first to say it is the best made. Like, it is the best movie in terms of just merits of itself.
Oh, sure.
It's hard to top that. I hope they never remake it.
Oh, please don't.
If they do, it better be stop motion. I want a stop motion.
I wouldn't be upset with a stage play that just people could just
that's fine.
Perform it.
That's fine.
Then they eventually make the stage play into a movie.
If they do a stage play, I want Hugh Jackman.
George Bailey?
Yes.
Okay.
You can,
There's no songs in...
Well, if they make a stage play, they would incorporate songs.
I don't know how I feel about that. Huh.
They would need... You're not going to do a stage play. It'd be broad. It'd be music. They'd have to be...
I don't know what I think of that. But
if you're going to do it right.
All right.
Make it different enough where it's different.
Yeah. They made a Christmas Story into a stage play.
I don't want to see that, though.
And I think they made a movie about the stage play. And then they made like 2 sequel movies to the original movie.
Yeah, I think 2 official sequels that are not connected to each other and don't acknowledge each other's existence. This is because they got the main actor back.
Yeah.
All right. So that was Ernest Saves Christmas. And glad to have a live in studio version with Adam here with him. Yeah. And we'll get to, and I think the end of next year, we'll get our graphic novel, Ernest and the Dreamstone.
All right.
But, yeah.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Ho, ho.